Alright guys, so this morning I got this lawnmower in on a trade towards another lawnmower that I was selling. I've already just did a video on how to determine a lawnmower's value because that was a video request. So you guys can see all that stuff in the description bar if you so choose to. I've already determined that this mower has a good amount of compression, the blade is fine, and the crankshaft is not bent. The guy that I got it from told me that it just stopped working. And so let's get started. We'll go ahead and pull the air filter box off. And the air filter definitely needs some attention. Looks like we've got a spider residing in here somewhere. Looks like he's right there. So we'll set that aside. Fuel line still feels good, so we'll save that. But first we'll go ahead and remove the other part of the air filter box off. Set this aside, but we'll set the screw inside of the mag bolt. And now we have much better access here to the rest of the filter box. PCV line came off, so you need to reinstall that. And now we're at the carburetor. So the carburetor definitely looks dirty. This carburetor is more than likely dirty. You guys can see that a little bit. Let me zoom you in. And so as you guys can see, the carburetor does have some old fuel that's kind of congealed right here. So this carburetor is more than likely the bare minimum just going to need a cleaning. But I do have rebuild parts on hand, so we'll go ahead and pull the fuel line off and back. And so I got the fuel line off. I've done it both ways, either with a pair of vice grips to pinch it off up here, or just stick a screwdriver in all the way back to the clamp there, and it creates a good enough seal. So we can go ahead and move this out of the way. If that fuel line was cracked, you wouldn't want to do that, but you'd want to replace it anyways. So now we can get to the carburetor. These are kind of fun to remove. You have to get I believe a 1/4-inch wrench and take that top bolt off. Go ahead and remove this. And so now with this removed and just sitting haphazardly there at the side, we can now go ahead and take the two bolts off, holding the carburetor. So now the carburetor is free. There you have it. So now let's pull it apart and give it a good thorough cleaning. So now we have the carburetor. So it's a 1/2-inch bolt that holds the bowl on at the bottom. And we'll just remove that. It's going to be dripping fuel, but that's why I've got the mag bowl here to catch it. It needs a good wash anyways. So here's the bottom bolt. And I can already tell you guys, this is definitely gummed up. So I'll show you guys how to clean them out. I've been using the way that I've done that for years. So actually we can stick it in some of the gas. Maybe that'll do something. Probably not, but whatever. So then we can just pull the bowl off. The inside's not actually all that bad. So we'll go ahead and set that down. And we'll pull the float out. So there's the float pin. Here's the float. Float looks to be in good shape. And then we have the needle, and as well as the seat that's in there. The seat looks okay, so I'm not going to really mess with that too much. The whole inside of this carburetor is actually fairly clean. Now generally when I clean out a carburetor, I'll squirt a little bit of carb cleaner in it, and that always cleans it out really well. I've also used mechanics wire to clean out some of these holes and everything in there, and definitely in that bolt, that's what I'm going to be doing. Now, I know some of you guys are going to say that you do this a certain different way, but you know, I've been doing it this way for years, and I have never once had an issue doing it this way. So we can start with this one. Then we'll do this one. Some of you guys are going to say that, you know, squirting carb cleaner into the seat like that is going to damage it. It's really not. This stuff evaporates so quickly. If you were using brake cleaner, that'd be a little bit different. But this carb cleaner, it just evaporates and it's gone so quickly that, again, I've never had an issue once with anything like that. And that's really all there is to it. You also have these here, which I've used mechanics wire to clean out before, but we'll see if the carb cleaner will do anything. And that cleaned that one out pretty good. There you have it. So now just to scrape that gasket off. So now we're about to attack the little bolt here. As you can see, there's a lot of green corrosion from old gas sitting on the top of it. So we'll go ahead and take all that off with a wire brush. That looks a lot better. A little bit of corrosion on the threads and some green grime on the shaft there. We'll scrape that all as well. So I just grabbed the wire, straighten it out a little bit, and then that tiny little hole that's in there, I just poke the wire down there and just kind of wiggle it back and forth a little bit. You're not going to widen the hole doing that. I've had some people say that before, but that's not going to happen. I've never had that happen to me. And this stuff is small enough that it's actually smaller than the little opening that's inside there. This goes in nice and easy, and there's a fairly significant amount of wiggle room inside. So that's how I clean it out. You can also use a small wire from a wire brush as well and do the same thing. So I always stick it in through the bottom, and I do the same thing. As you guys can see, that hole is definitely a lot bigger. So I'll do it that side, and then I'll do it this side as well. And now we can finish it off with blowing some carb cleaner through the top. And it is now nice and clean and ready to reinstall. So now we can reinstall everything into the bottom of the carburetor. The first thing you want to do is grab your needle, which the needle is in really clean, really good condition. This carburetor, I suspect, was just because it was gummed up at the bottom. It just wasn't wanting to work for the guy. So go ahead and throw your float back on. Grab your float pin. Stick that through the hole. There you have it. Works just fine. So now we can grab the bowl, throw your bowl back on. Now this little bottom gasket, sometimes they like to stay on the carburetor, and I never pull them off unless I absolutely have to. When you pull them off, and if you don't have any extras on hand, which I don't know if I do or not, I know I do in the rebuild kits, but I don't want to break a rebuild kit open unless I absolutely have to. But you don't really want to remove those bottom gaskets from the bottom of the carburetor unless you absolutely need to, because you try and remove that, you're probably going to damage it, and if you reuse it, it's probably going to leak. So anyways, you can just go ahead and cinch it down. I just snug it up. I don't over tighten those at all. Butterfly valve's working good. Choke's working good as well. So it's pretty much ready to be reinstalled. So now we can go ahead and reinstall the carburetor. Got both the bolts right here. And there's also a little O-ring here. You always want to make sure that's there. Sometimes it could come out with the carburetor and you might drop it, but it's a very common O-ring. You can get those at really any auto parts store. Just bring in your old one if you've still got it, if it's damaged or anything, and you can size it up with the correct one. I actually bought an O-ring kit from Harbor Freight that I've used throughout the years, and it's worked out fine for me. And I always cinch these down by hand. So not too tight, but you do want to make sure they're nice and snug. And make sure that little tip right there is lined up on the butterfly valve. And I do thread these in with my fingers first before I stick the wrench on them, just because it makes them a little easier to work with. Now you can over tighten these, So you want to make sure that it's definitely nice and loose and does the job it's intended to do. And it just bottomed out, so I didn't go any further. And it's functioning as intended. Governor linkage is functioning as it's intended. So now we can go ahead and clean off this mating surface for the gasket. Very easy to do. I use a Craftsman gasket scraper. Works pretty good. There's actually really not much of the gasket that's left on it. And I'm going to be careful not to get any of the shavings into the carburetor, because then I'm going to have to fish them out, of course. And so that's nice and clean, and it's ready to accept a new gasket. But before we do that, we'll go ahead and reinstall our fuel line. So now that'll fill the bowl up. And just bring your little clamp forward. So here's the part number for the new gasket, and we're ready to reinstall it back onto the lawnmower. Now these can be kind of tricky because you want to put a uniform amount of pressure on all these bolts when you reinstall them, because if this thing starts contorting and bending because you tighten these up too tight, it's going to let too much air into the carburetor and the priming system isn't going to work correctly. So you always want to make sure that you get these in very evenly. And it's not hard to do either to over tighten them, just because it's a plastic box. I've never really been a huge fan of this design, specifically for that reason. So just make sure you don't over tighten these and you should be good to go. And the PCV line is on and snug. You can kind of feel it start to build resistance once it starts bottoming out on the plastic. So you always want to put them on, you want to kind of stop right at that point. But they're nice and snug how they are right now. So let's go ahead and take the mower off the truck and see if she'll give us a start now. So I guess you guys can say when I do a first initial start on one of these, I start them with the filter box off, so I more or less do a dry run with them. And I always do it on a paved surface such as this concrete. And with the air filter off, never start them on the grass. You're just asking for stuff to get sucked into the carburetor and give you another job to do. I did already check the oil off camera. I forgot to show you guys that, but it's got plenty of oil in it. I might give it an oil change anyways, just because, but I'm definitely happy with that. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the filter box back on and give it a test. Got some grass behind the shop too. And so I just replaced the air filter, sorted out the blade control cable, and I've also got an extra side chute. I don't sell these on with the lawnmower. This is just an extra one I had on hand because I don't bag any of the clippings out here. There's also not much grass out right now, but we'll go ahead and do some mowing anyways. I know a lot of you guys like to see that. does a decent enough job. Just need to finish off over here. Not a big deal. I'd get over there, but there's a lot of rocks over there along the fence. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this quick video on this thing, and stay tuned for more. You all stay classy.